Thank you, Sir Roby, for your question. But before I respond to that, I would like to confirm that the Philippine Coast Guard had an MDA flight yesterday over Ayungin Shoal, Pag-asa Island, and Sabina Shoal. And it is true that we also monitored some Chinese maritime militia and PLA Navy vessel and Chinese Coast Guard in the territorial seas in Pag-asa Island. And at the same time, we also flew over Ayungin Shoal. We also noted the presence of the China Coast Guard. And also in Sabina Shoal, we have observed 17 Chinese maritime militia. But what is notable with our MDA flight is that we noticed that there is significant decrease of the number of Chinese maritime militia. For example, in Pag-asa, last Saturday, we reported there were like 42 Chinese maritime militia. But yesterday, there were only 15 of them. And also in Ayungin, 2 weeks ago, we reported that there were Chinese maritime militia there, but anchored within the shoal. But there are no more militia anchored there. And then for Sabina as well, 2 weeks ago, we observed there were 26. Now there are only 17. So...
Hello? Commodore Tariela?
Yes, hello?
Yes, naputo lang po kayo, but let me just follow up. So, kumonti yung nakita nyo doon na vessels. Does that necessarily indicate a trend, or is this probably just something as part of the routine and the regular positioning of Chinese vessels? In other words, do we expect that to continue? Are we expecting the numbers to go up again after a number of weeks or days?
Since this is only the second time that we follow up in observing the number of Chinese maritime militia, we cannot still ascertain whether there is a significant decrease. But hopefully in the next coming weeks, as we continue our MDA flight in monitoring the Chinese maritime militia in the West Philippine Sea, probably we can say that there is an increase or significant decrease of the Chinese maritime militia. But in the past weeks, I think it is very important for us to note that the Philippine Coast Guard, in support of the intention of our President and through the approval of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, have become more transparent. We are exposing this presence of the militia. So, best whether publishing other evidence and presence of Chinese maritime militia is effective or not.
All right, sir, you spoke about going against gray zone tactics. You talked about operating in the black and white. What exactly do you mean by that?
I spoke in the ADRI event the other day as an academic. What I'm saying there is that the effect of the Chinese Coast Guard strategy in the West Philippine Sea is more of the gray zone. Gray zone in a context that it is short of war, but it can also be construed as a basic law enforcement. So there's a gray area that the Chinese has been doing. For example, we cannot really say that the utilization of the Chinese Coast Guard or the Chinese maritime militia is just focused on law enforcement or basically, engaged in fishing. They are using, obviously, these vessels to assert their presence in the West Philippine Sea. But of course, you cannot also say that these are already a form of aggressive action in the part of the People's Republic of China. So that gray area is something that we have to understand in order for us to come up with a better strategy in the West Philippine Sea.
But Commodore, in terms of understanding it, that's already... How do we do it when we proceed on the assumption that we do already understand that their Coast Guard is really of a different nature to our Coast Guard? Our Coast Guard is clearly civilian in nature. They are clearly positioning their Coast Guard clearly in this gray zone. What else is there to understand? And more importantly, once we take a position on what that means and what stance they're taking, does that limit our options?
Well, based on my presentation as an academic the other day, I would argue that the best way for us to address the Chinese gray zone activities in the South China Sea is to expose it. If we keep on exposing the behavior and aggressive action of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels and the Chinese maritime militia, from there we can already tell the world that they are not utilizing their vessels, particularly their white ships, in accordance with the international law. And of course, through the exposure of harassment of the Chinese maritime militia as well, and their swarming strategy in a particular area, we can also be able to put a spotlight that this is just a shadow of their intention of occupying a particular territory in the South China Sea.
Sir, is it safe to say?
Yes.
Sir, is it safe to say that there's also a lot that we don't know yet? If you're exposing it now, publicizing all of these encounters, has a lot happened in the past that we don't know of?
Well, Ms. Gretchen, when we say gray, this is just, we cannot really label it as a black or white. No? Hindi natin masabing this an aggressive action or this just purely law enforcement. What they're doing is to confuse us, whether to categorize it as an act of aggression or not considered as an act of aggression. So if your question is, do we know exactly what they are doing to call it as a gray zone? I think so. The mere fact that the Chinese Coast Guard, we know that as a Coast Guard universally has to enforce maritime safety, and yet their Chinese Coast Guard vessel is, violating the collision regulation, doing dangerous maneuver. This is against the international law.